Picture this. I'm standing at the edge of my perfectly trimmed lawn, the scent of freshly cut grass clinging to the air, and I'm staring at the same white picket fence I've seen every single day for the past 5 years. It's not just a fence, it's a boundary. A line drawn around my life that I didn't even notice until it started to feel like a noose. My name's Lily. I'm 31. And I've got everything a person's supposed to want. A cozy suburban home in Ohio. A husband who's as steady as they come. And a routine so polished it could blind you. But lately, I've been itching for something I can't name. Something that doesn't come with a schedule or a checklist. Let me tell you about Paul, my husband. He's 34, an accountant with a knack for numbers and a predictability that could rival the sunrise. We've been together for 8 years, married for 5, and I swear I can set my watch to the sound of his car pulling into the driveway at 6 p.m. sharp. He's a good man, too good, if I'm honest. Always planning our weekends with the same dinner at that little Italian place on Main Street, followed by a movie he's already picked out. Once, that kind of stability was my safe harbor, a warm blanket on a cold night. But now it feels like I'm wrapped too tight, like I can't breathe under the weight of all that sameness. I catch myself staring at him over dinner, wondering if he ever feels it too, this quiet suffocation. But his smile never wavers, and I'm left with my thoughts, unspoken. Then there's Jenna, my best friend since college. She's 30, a graphic designer with a wild streak a mile wide, always showing up with some new story about a spontaneous road trip or a late-night adventure. She's the kind of person who dyes her hair electric blue on a whim and laughs like the world's her playground. "Lily, you gotta live a little," she's always saying, her eyes sparkling with mischief as she sips her 3rd glass of wine. She's the voice in my head that won't shut up, the one daring me to step outside the lines Paul and I have drawn around our life. I love her for it, even if I roll my eyes when she suggests I ditch everything for a weekend in Vegas. But deep down, her words stick, burrowing into the cracks of my restlessness. And then there's Mark, Paul's closest friend. He's 35, a contractor with hands that are always a little rough from work and a laugh that fills up a room. He's got this easy charm, a way of looking at you that feels like he's seeing more than he should. I've caught his gaze lingering a little too long, more times than I care to admit, and there's this unspoken heat there, a flicker of something dangerous that I push down as soon as it surfaces. He's around a lot, and I woke up that Saturday morning with a jolt, my heart already racing before my eyes even fully opened. Sunlight streamed through the curtains of our bedroom, painting golden streaks across the quilt, and for a moment, I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling this strange cocktail of nervous energy and anticipation bubbling up inside me. Tonight was the night, the party we'd been planning for weeks, a chance to shake things up, to break the monotony that had settled over our lives like dust. But beneath that excitement, there was something else, a gnawing restlessness I couldn't quite pin down. I rolled over to see Paul still asleep, his steady breathing a stark contrast to the storm brewing in my chest. How could he be so calm when I felt like I was teetering on the edge of something I didn't fully understand? I slipped out of bed and padded to the kitchen, brewing a pot of coffee while my mind spun. Paul wandered in a few minutes later, rubbing sleep from his eyes, his brow furrowing as he looked at the calendar on the fridge. "You sure about this party, Lily?" he asked, his voice thick with doubt. "I mean, 20 people? Our house is going to be a wreck by midnight." I forced a smile, pouring him a mug and sliding it across the counter. "Come on, it'll be fun. We need this. A night to let loose, to just be us with our friends. When's the last time we did something like this?" He sighed, taking a sip, but I could see the reluctance lingering in his eyes. Still, he nodded, and I felt a small victory, even if my own nerves were screaming louder than ever. The rest of the day was a blur of activity. I threw myself into cleaning every inch of our little suburban home, scrubbing counters until they gleamed, vacuuming the living room rug until not a speck of dust remained. I wanted everything to be perfect, or at least to look like it. By mid-afternoon, I was in the backyard, stringing up fairy lights that twinkled like tiny stars against the fading daylight. I dragged out our old Bluetooth speaker and spent way too long curating a playlist, upbeat pop tracks mixed with gritty rock hits that I hoped would get everyone moving. My hands were busy, but my mind kept wandering, circling back to that restless hunger I couldn't name. Was it just the party jitters? Or something deeper? I took a break to call Jenna, needing to hear her voice, to anchor myself. "Hey, wild child, you still coming tonight?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. She laughed through the phone, that infectious sound that always made me smile despite myself. "Wouldn't miss it for the world, babe. Gotta see you and Paul spice things up a bit, you know? Shake off that married couple dust." Her teasing hit closer to home than she could have guessed, and I felt my cheeks flush, grateful she couldn't see me. Yeah. As the party roared on into the night, I found myself slipping away from the crowded kitchen, where laughter and clinking glasses blended into a muffled hum. I wandered into the living room, the dim glow of a single lamp casting long shadows across the familiar space. The fairy lights from the backyard barely filtered through the curtains, leaving the room in a hazy twilight that felt like it was hiding secrets of its own. My heart was pounding, not just from the bass of the music vibrating through the walls, but from something darker, something I'd been planning in the quiet corners of my mind for longer than I'd admit. This wasn't just a party anymore. This was my moment to break free, to shatter the cage of routine I'd been locked in for years. I glanced at the low, heavy cabinet near the couch, a piece Paul and I had picked out together at a flea market years ago, back when every shared decision felt like a promise. It was sturdy, dark wood, with just enough space beneath it for what I had in mind. A sudden impulse surged through me, raw and unstoppable, like a wave crashing over every rational thought. I dropped to my knees, the cool hardwood pressing against my skin, and crawled under the cabinet, wedging myself in just tight enough to make it look convincing. My fingers gripped the underside, nails digging into the rough grain as I held on with everything I had. My pulse was a wild drumbeat in my ears, a mix of fear and exhilaration that made my breath come in shallow gasps. I was really doing this. There was no turning back now. I let out a shout, my voice cracking with a desperation I didn't have to fake entirely. "Help! I'm stuck! Someone, please!" The words echoed in the quiet room, and I waited, my body tense, every muscle coiled like a spring. It didn't take long before I heard hurried footsteps, the muffled noise from the kitchen growing louder as the door swung open. Mark was the first to appear, his broad frame filling the doorway, concern etched across his face. Behind him was Ryan, a quieter guy I'd only met a handful of times, a mechanic in his early 30s with a reserved demeanor that made his presence feel almost ghostly. Their eyes widened as they saw me, half under the cabinet, my face flushed and my breathing ragged. "Lily, what the hell happened?" Mark asked, dropping to one knee beside me, his rough hands hovering near my arm. Ryan crouched on the other side, his brow furrowed as he assessed the situation. I was reaching for something and I got stuck," I stammered, letting my voice tremble just enough. "I can't get out. Please, help me." They exchanged a quick glance before each grabbed an arm, pulling gently at first, then with more force. I tightened my grip on the cabinet's underside, resisting just enough to make it seem real, my fake panic rising in pitch. "It hurts! I can't move!" Their efforts grew more urgent, their hands firm on my arms. But I held on, my mind racing with the next step of my plan. Then, lowering my voice to a deliberate whisper, I let the words slip out, heavy with intent. You can do whatever you want with me. The air in the room seemed to freeze, a stunned silence swallowing the space between us. Mark's expression shifted, a slow smirk curling at the corner of his mouth, while Ryan's eyes widened, his hesitation palpable. I could see the conflict flicker across his face, but Mark didn't waver. He leaned back on his heels, his voice low and edged with something dangerous. You serious, Lily? Before I could answer, he stood, turning toward the kitchen door. Hey guys, get in here. You gotta see this. My stomach twisted with a mix of dread and thrill as I heard more footsteps, the sound of curious voices growing closer. Soon, 5 more of Paul's friends crowded into the room: Tom, Jake, Ethan, Chris, and Derek, all guys in their 30s, a mix of old college buddies and co-workers I'd seen at countless barbecues and game nights. Their expressions ranged from confusion to intrigue as Mark gestured toward me, still wedged. My heart was a jackhammer in my chest as the room buzzed with the low murmurs of the guys around me, their voices a mix of uncertainty and curiosity. I was still under the cabinet, my fingers aching from gripping the wood, my breath shallow as I felt the weight of what I'd just set in motion. The air was thick, charged with a tension that felt like it could snap at any second. Then, cutting through the haze like a knife, I heard it, slow, deliberate footsteps approaching from the hallway. My stomach dropped, a cold sweat prickling at the back of my neck. I knew those steps, the familiar rhythm I'd heard 1,000 times coming home after a long day. Paul. I tilted my head just enough to see the doorway, and there he was. My husband stood frozen, his frame filling the space, his face drained of color like he'd seen a ghost. The beer bottle in his hand slipped, almost in slow motion, crashing to the hardwood floor with a sharp, echoing shatter. Amber liquid pooled around the broken glass, reflecting the dim light, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from him. His expression, it was like I'd taken a sledgehammer to everything we'd built. Shock, betrayal, pain, all etched into the lines of his face as his gaze locked onto me, half hidden under the cabinet we'd chosen together all those years ago. The room went deathly still. The guys around me scattered like leaves in a storm, muttering half-hearted excuses under their breath as they backed away, disappearing into the kitchen or down the hall. I was alone now, still crouched in this ridiculous position, the weight of my actions crashing over me like a tidal wave. I felt exposed, raw, like every secret I'd buried was suddenly laid bare under the harsh light of his stare. My knees ached against the floor as I slowly started to crawl out, the rough wood scraping against my skin, each movement deliberate and heavy. I couldn't look at him, not yet. I focused on the grain of the floor, the tiny scratches and scuffs from years of life, trying to anchor myself in something, anything. But the reality of this moment, the silence was suffocating, pressing down on me like a physical force. The only sound was Paul's breathing, shaky and uneven, cutting through the stillness like a jagged edge. I could feel his eyes on me, burning into my skin, and when I finally dragged myself out from under the cabinet and stood on trembling legs, I forced myself to meet his gaze. Tears streamed down his face, silent and unchecked, his eyes red-rimmed and wide with disbelief. This was the man I'd promised forever to, the man who'd held my hand through every storm, now breaking right in front of me. A stab of shame pierced through my chest, sharp and unrelenting, twisting in my gut until I thought I might be sick. I'd done this. I'd taken the life we'd built and set it on fire, just to feel something other than numb. But then, as I stood there, watching him crumble, a colder realization washed over me, dousing the guilt like ice water. I didn't care. Not anymore. The shame was there, yes, but it was fleeting. A shadow passing over something harder, something resolute that had been growing inside me for months, maybe years. I brushed off my dress with slow, deliberate movements, the fabric smoothing under my hands as I straightened my spine. I looked at Paul, really looked at him, and felt the words form before I even knew I was going to say them. "I'm done," I said, my voice flat, stripped of any warmth or apology. "I've been suffocating in this marriage, Paul. I can't do it anymore." He staggered back a step, like my words had physically struck him, and then collapsed onto the couch, his head dropping into his hands. His shoulders shook, silent sobs racking through him, and I just stood there, watching, feeling like I was outside my own body. The murmur of voices started up again, soft at first, then louder as partygoers began peeking into the room from the hallway and kitchen. Their whispers buzzed like flies, the air thick. I stood there for a moment, the weight of my words still hanging heavy in the air, watching Paul crumble on the couch. The whispers from the hallway grew louder, a swarm of judgment I couldn't face. I turned away, my legs feeling like lead, and made my way toward the stairs. My heart was a tangled mess of resolve and regret, but I knew I couldn't stay in this house another second. Not with the eyes of strangers boring into me, not with Paul's silent pain echoing in my ears. I had to move, to act, to sever this life once and for all. I climbed the stairs, each step a hammer strike against the past I was leaving behind. Up in our bedroom, the quiet was deafening compared to the chaos below. The bed was still unmade from this morning, a reminder of the normalcy I'd just shattered. I crossed to the closet, my hands trembling as I yanked open the door and pulled out the old suitcase we'd taken on our honeymoon. The leather was scuffed, the zipper stiff from years of disuse, but it held memories of a time when Paul and I were full of hope, laughing under a tropical sun. Now it felt like a relic of someone else's life. I threw it open on the bed, the hinges creaking, and started grabbing clothes off hangers. Dresses, jeans, whatever my hands touched first. I didn't care about folding or organizing. I just stuffed them in, my movements frantic, like I was racing against some invisible clock. Makeup from the vanity went in next, tubes and compacts clattering together, followed by a handful of jewelry I barely glanced at. I was packing to escape, not to plan. Then I saw it, sitting on the nightstand, a framed photo of us on our wedding day. Paul's arm was around me, his smile wide and genuine, my white dress glowing in the sunlight. I picked it up, my thumb brushing over his face, smudging the glass. For a split second, I felt a pang, a sharp ache for what we'd been. But it wasn't enough to stop me. I couldn't go back to that version of us, no matter how much it hurt to let go. I tossed the frame face down on the bed, the sound of it hitting the mattress a dull thud in the quiet room. That was it. The final goodbye to a dream I'd outgrown. Downstairs, I could hear the party winding down, the voices growing hushed, the music a faint hum now. The air felt thinner up here, but I knew I couldn't linger. Every minute I stayed was another chance to falter, to let guilt pull me back into the cage I'd just broken free from. I zipped the suitcase shut with a decisive tug, the sound cutting through my spiraling thoughts. I'd already made up my mind about where I was going. Mark. The thought of him sent a shiver through me, a mix of thrill and uncertainty. He'd been the first to rush to my side under that cabinet, his rough hands steady, his eyes holding a spark of something I'd always been drawn to, even when I tried to deny it. That dangerous charm, the way he looked at me like he knew every restless thought in my head. It had always been there, simmering beneath the surface. Now, I wasn't pushing it down anymore. I was diving in. I pulled out my phone, my fingers fumbling as I typed a quick message to him. "Can I crash at your place? Need to get out of here." I hit send, my breath catching as I waited. Within seconds, my screen lit up with his reply. "Hell yes, I'm outside." My pulse quickened, a surge of adrenaline pushing me forward. I didn't have time to second-guess this. I grabbed the suitcase handle, the weight of it grounding me as I dragged it toward the door. Each step down the stairs felt heavier, the murmurs from below growing clearer again. I could feel the stares of the lingering guests as I descended, their eyes like pinpricks on my skin. I didn't look at them. I couldn't. My focus was straight ahead, on the front door, on the freedom waiting just beyond the threshold. I pushed through the front door, the cool night air hitting my face like a slap, sharp and sobering. Mark was there, leaning against his beat-up truck, arms crossed, a smirk playing on his lips as he watched me drag my suitcase down the steps. His eyes held that same dangerous glint I'd seen earlier, and for a moment, I felt like I was stepping off a cliff, unsure if I'd fall or fly. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. I threw my bag into the back of his truck, climbed into the passenger seat, and let the door slam shut behind me, a sound that felt like the final nail in the coffin of my old life. It's been a week since that night, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around where I've landed. I'm in Mark's apartment now, a small, cluttered place a few towns over from the pristine suburban bubble I used to call home. The contrast hits me every time I walk through the door. My old house was all clean lines and polished surfaces, everything in its place, a mirror of the life I'd curated with Paul. Here, though, it's chaos in the best and worst ways. Empty beer cans litter the coffee table. Tools and work boots are strewn across the floor, and the couch sags under the weight of mismatched blankets. The air smells faintly of motor oil and cigarette smoke, a far cry from the lavender candles I used to burn. But there's something raw about it, something real that I didn't even know I was craving until I got here. I've got no schedule, no expectations. I sleep until noon if I want, blast music loud enough to rattle the thin walls, and answer to no one. That initial thrill of freedom, it's still there, buzzing under my skin like a live wire, making me feel alive in a way I haven't in years. Mark's a big part of that. He's the opposite of Paul in every way I can think of. Where Paul was predictable, Mark's a wildfire, untamed and impossible to pin down. We've spent the last few nights tearing through the back roads in his truck, windows down, the wind whipping through my hair as some gritty rock song blares through the speakers. He drives too fast, takes corners like he's daring the universe to stop him, and I can't help but laugh, my heart racing with the sheer recklessness of it all. Then, there are the spontaneous bar trips where we end up in dive joints with sticky floors and neon signs flickering over the door. He'll pull me onto the dance floor, his hands firm on my hips, guiding me through the crowd with a kind of confidence that makes my pulse spike. Those moments, when the world narrows to just the heat of his touch and the thrum of the music, feel like a rebellion against everything I used to be. We've shared more than just dances, too. Late nights where the air between us crackles, and we give in to the pull we've both felt for far too long. It's a kind of intimacy I can't describe outright, but let's just say it's the kind of connection that leaves you breathless, tangled in sheets, and wondering how you ever lived without it. But even with all that, I can't shake the doubts that creep in when the high wears off. Mark's carefree nature, the very thing that drew me to him, sometimes feels like a double-edged sword. He's wild, sure, but there's a recklessness to him that borders on dangerous. He'll disappear for hours without a word, come back with a grin and no explanation, and I'm left wondering what I've gotten myself into. I catch myself staring at the mess of his apartment, at the way he shrugs off responsibilities like they're nothing, and I wonder if I've traded one cage for another. Paul's world was suffocating in its order. but at least I knew where I stood. With Mark, I'm on shaky ground, and there are moments when I feel like I'm free-falling with no safety net in sight. Did I really escape, or did I just jump into a different kind of trap? I've cut ties with most of my old friends and routines, trying to embrace this new chapter in my life. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.